writers always tend to focus on words, understandably. And I would always try to generate emotion through words. I would used to try and write clever dialogue or a brilliant turn of phrase. And that can work, but that's the intellectual route. If you want to engage an audience emotionally, it's less about the message and more about the medium. A whisper in the ear, doesn't matter what's said. A dark forest, a message that appears in an unexpected place on your way to work. Each of those provokes a very different type of emotional reaction, and by being aware of what those emotional reactions are, we can add them to our palette as storytellers. They become instruments in our orchestra, and we can employ them more skillfully. And the same goes for new digital media, which is what I found out when I was working on Sherlock, the network, which made it quite intimidating to come on board as a writer, a narrative designer, to create a new Sherlock story. Anyway, the network is a kind of interactive episode of the TV show, which was released as an app for tablets and mobiles. It's on iOS and Android. And it tells a self-contained new story that includes original scenes filmed with the main cast, filmed on the same sets as the TV show, and the whole thing was supervised by the producers of the TV show. They wanted it to be every bit as good as one of the broadcast TV episodes. Now, in any kind of adaptation, there are 5 things you have to get right to make sure it's consistent. And these are the basics. These are the absolute minimum. First thing is character. And we, of course, made sure the characters were the same as in the show. We got that right by using the same cast. The audience was amazed that we got the real actors, the real Sherlock and the real Watson. And in everything they said and did, we made sure that they behaved in the same way as in the show. The location, we stayed consistent as well. We filmed on the same sets as the TV show at the same time that they were filming the TV show. And we gave a very strong sense of the story being set in London, because London is practically a character itself in the stories. Tone of voice. The language, the intelligence, the sense of humor is arguably what makes a big part of the show so successful. Theme, you could almost call it like the tone of events as opposed to the tone of voice. In any Sherlock story, you know that there's probably going to be a murder, it's going to be really complicated, and it's a case that nobody else could solve. Those are the kind of events you can expect in a Sherlock story. And finally, the rules, the sort of natural logic of the universe. So those 5 things are the absolute basics if you want to create something, an extension of an existing property that's going to be authentic. But when you add interactivity in there as well, then there's a whole new set of questions you have to ask yourself and you have to answer and get right. And they all have their own emotional implications. So the first thing is, what is your role as a player, as an audience member? Who are you? And this is a tricky question for us. Did we want to make the player Sherlock or John or Mrs. Hudson? It's a tricky question, and I'll come back to what we did in a minute. The framing device is kind of the reason why you are doing what you're doing. Why are you doing this right now? Why are you on your phone? Why are you talking to a detective in London? And the third thing is the mechanics, what you do. What are your actions in the game? Are you shooting things? Are you flinging pigs or birds? Are you crushing candy? What actions can you take? And you need to know how it feels, because it's all part of the narrative designer's vocabulary, their armory, their orchestra. You have to understand how a medium feels, and then you can use its emotional subtleties and play to its strengths. That's my message here. It's very simple. Use the medium yourself so you can get a feel of it, get your hands on it. You need to know all of the instruments in your orchestra. You don't need to be able to play every single instrument like a maestro, but you need to know the difference between them. You need to know if you're telling, if you're orchestrating music and you've got a romantic theme that you want to play, you don't want the tuba playing the lead in your beautiful romantic orchestral creation. Probably the violins would be a better choice. You need to know what the emotional valence of each instrument in your orchestra is going to be. And just as not all video is equal and not all games are the same, so virtual reality is not a single medium. So you're not going to be creating the same content for Oculus as you would be for Google Cardboard. They're both valid media, but they have different emotional impacts. They have different demands. They are better at communicating different types of stories. So understanding those subtleties is part of the writer's art now. Thanks.